The dawn rose slowly over the growing West African town, painting the sky with the soft glow of bronze and gold. The morning breeze carried the smell of wet earth, whispering against the tin roofs and old clay houses. Children ran between narrow paths, their laughter mixing with the low hum of waking birds. In this place, every sunrise felt like a visiting elder, blessing the land before the day's troubles began. Here, tradition walked side by side with modern ways. A man might check his phone in one hand while greeting an elder with the other. Young boys chased dreams of big cities, yet still bowed their heads when passing the village shrine. Old rules and new hopes clashed quietly, like two drums trying to find the same rhythm. In this community, a man was judged not by the weight of his pocket but by how he treated his home. People listened closely, not to loud voices, but to how a man spoke to his wife when no one watched. "A home shows a man's true face," old women would say as they pounded yam under the shade of mango trees. The markets came alive as the sun climbed higher. Bright colors swung from stalls: red pepper, yellow cloth, green plantain. Drums echoed through narrow passages, calling people like heartbeat and thunder. Stories of the ancestors flowed freely, told by griots whose voices carried the power of memory. "Remember where you stand," they would say. "The land listens." Above it all, the elders watched silently. They sat beneath the iroko tree, their eyes calm yet sharp, guarding the spirit of the land the way a mother guards her newborn. They rarely spoke, but when they did, even the wind paused to listen. In this same town lived Obinna, a man whose pride walked faster than his shadow. He had the kind of presence that filled a room before he stepped inside. People said his chest rose with every compliment, as if praise was air meant only for him. His voice was loud, and his temper flashed quicker than lightning on a stormy night. He loved attention the way the dry season loved fire. His wife, Amara, was the opposite. She was the quiet river that hid deep strength beneath still waters. Her calmness made others lean in whenever she spoke. She was raised in tradition, shaped by grace, and known for a soft heart that could soothe even the hardest day. But even a river can flood when pushed too far. And then there was Needy, the city flame. She walked like she owned every path, her eyes sharp enough to cut pride and her laughter full of mischief. She carried the scent of big cities, perfume, ambition, and trouble wrapped in red lipstick and bright clothes. Around them was the circle that made every story breathe: elders with wise frowns, neighbors with curious eyes, and friends who always managed to add more drama than peace. Together, they watched everything, the way a crowd watches the opening of a masquerade dance. Obinna and Amara's marriage stood on uneven stones. Inside their home, pride spoke louder than love. Whenever Amara cooked, Obinna would lift the lid with a twisted mouth and say, "Is this what you call food? Even the dogs outside deserve better." At gatherings, he mocked her clothing, her slow steps, even her silence. His laughter echoed, but hers never rose to answer. Amara swallowed her pain like bitter herbs, believing that keeping the home peaceful was part of her duty. She bowed her head and told herself, a wife must hold the house together, even as cracks formed beneath her feet. Villagers whispered among themselves. "A wife's tears water the ground of sorrow," old women murmured. But the weight of Obinna's wealth closed their mouths. Money speaks loudly, even where wisdom lives. No one dared challenge him. Not yet. Still, the cracks deepened. Love faded like old cloth left too long in the sun. And though no one said it aloud, everyone felt the wind shifting, carrying with it the smell of a storm yet to come. The early signs of trouble began quietly, like the first weak rumble before a heavy storm. Obinna's eyes started drifting toward the glitter of the city, toward loud music, shiny cars, fast-spoken people who lived without the slow footsteps of tradition. When he returned home from town, he carried the smell of foreign ways, expensive cologne, sharp words, and a restless spirit. Amara noticed the change. Even the way he looked at her felt different, as if she no longer fit into the picture he painted in his dreaming mind. The divide between tradition and modern temptations widened with each passing day. Obinna laughed at old customs, calling them village stories, while Amara still tied her wrapper with respect and greeted elders with both hands. "Why must you act like you were born 100 years ago?" Obinna would say, raising his chin proudly. Amara would answer softly, "The roots of a tree must hold strong, or the branches will fall." But he brushed her words away like dust on his sleeve. Amara became a symbol of the old ways, steady, gentle, calm, while Obinna chased the new with hungry eyes. He admired city women who spoke boldly and walked with confidence, even if their voices carried no respect. His mockery of Amara grew louder. "You think wisdom is in pounding yam and sweeping floors," he sneered one evening. The neighbors heard his voice slice through the compound like a whip, and they exchanged uneasy looks. His insults became more than simple words. They became a sign that humility had slipped from his hands. In the quiet of night, when the moon shone like an elder's lantern, the spirits of the ancestors stirred. The wind rustled the trees as if whispering warnings. A calabash cracked on its own in the kitchen. A bird cried strangely at dusk. The land itself seemed uneasy, as though it sensed the early breaking of a home. Then came the day Obinna met Needy, the firebrand. She stepped into the marketplace wearing bright colors and a confidence that slapped the air. Her laughter rose above the noise like sparks flying from burning wood. Obinna stopped to stare before he even realized it. Her boldness drew him closer, the way a moth dances toward flame without thinking of the burn. She called him handsome man with sharp shoes, and his chest rose like a cock preparing for morning. He forgot himself. Meanwhile, Amara's quiet tears fell like a soft rain no one noticed. Every time he returned home smelling of city perfume, she wiped her eyes before he could see. Her silence clashed painfully with Needy's fiery confidence. Even the elders could sense it. "That woman's tongue," they murmured, "will cut sharper than a blade." The breaking point arrived at the festival, a day meant for joy, dancing, and thanksgiving. Drums thundered like hearts pounding with excitement. Markets overflowed with color, and children chased masquerades across open fields. But for Amara, this day would become a wound she carried for years. As people gathered, Obinna began his usual mockery, but this time it echoed through the crowd. "Look at her head tie," he shouted. "Even a blind goat could tie it better." The traders paused. The drummers slowed. Even the chickens stopped scratching the ground. Shame swept through the air like cold wind. Amara stood still, her hands trembling around the basket she held. She whispered, "Obinna, please," but he only laughed louder. Traders and elders exchanged heavy looks. An old woman muttered. "This is not a good sign." The elders watched with deep sadness. These were men who had seen many storms in their lifetime, but few things unsettled them more than a man insulting his wife for entertainment. They nodded slowly, saying nothing, but their silence carried the weight of disappointment. Under the eyes of the community, Amara's spirit began to crumble. Every word he threw at her was another stone added to her chest. She felt her knees weaken, her voice trapped behind her lips. A young girl whispered, "Mama, why is the man shouting at his wife?" And the mother simply pulled her child close. The world around Amara dimmed. Elders whispered among themselves, "A shadow has fallen on the wife's heart." Their voices were low, heavy, filled with sadness for a woman whose suffering had now become visible to all. Even the ancestors must have paused to listen. And then came the moment Amara realized her pain had become a spectacle. People were watching, not to help, but to witness. Her shame was on display like goods laid out on a market mat. Her eyes burned. Her breath shook. She lowered her head, knowing her dignity had been scattered like dried leaves in the wind. As the festival continued around her, she stood alone in the crowd, feeling her heart break under the weight of a man who had forgotten the value of the woman standing quietly beside him. It was the kind of moment that changes a person forever, the kind that turns silence into strength, or into departure. The morning the trouble began was calm, but Obinna's heart was full of thunder. He no longer saw value in the ways of his people or in the gentle woman who had walked beside him for years. When Amara approached him with her quiet voice, he waved her away as if she were dust on his sleeve. "Enough of your old woman ways," he snapped. "I need a wife who matches my strength." His words were sharp, and they cut deeper than any blade. The elders who passed by paused, shaking their heads. They had seen many storms start with a man's careless tongue. Instead of seeking wisdom, Obinna let pride guide his steps. He declared divorce as if it were a trophy he had earned. He stood tall, chest puffed out, saying, "I release you. Go back to your people." No ceremony, no council meeting, no moment of reflection. Only pride speaking louder than reason. The villagers whispered among themselves, "A man who pushes peace away will soon kneel before chaos." Amara did not argue. She packed her small bag at dawn while the sky was pale and half asleep. She walked past the mango trees, past the well, past the life she once believed would protect her. Her eyes held tears, but none escaped. A few women tried to stop her, asking, "Amara, where will you go?" She only bowed her head and replied, "Where my spirit can breathe again." Her quiet footsteps were heavier than drums. Though she left without a word of anger, her heart carried wounds no one could see. She hid her scars beneath calm breaths and the soft way she greeted people. Even laughter, when it came, sounded borrowed. Yet she moved with strength, because Amara was the kind of woman who broke in silence and healed in silence too. The village felt her absence almost immediately. A soft coldness settled in the air. Gossip moved like harmattan wind. The traders said, "Obinna has thrown away a good thing." Elders muttered, "A peaceful wife is a shield. He has thrown his shield into the fire." And slowly, a new proverb began to rise on every tongue. "A man who insults peace calls storms to his door." Far from waiting for wisdom, Obinna rushed into a marriage that sparkled like city lights. His wedding with Needy was loud, filled with dancers, flashy clothes, and decorations that ignored every ancestral custom. No breaking of kola with elders, no blessings from the mothers, no ancestral songs. "We are modern people," Obinna declared proudly, as if tradition were an old cloth. In his heart, he believed he had finally found someone who walked with the same fire he carried. Needy was bold, confident, and sharp-tongued. She moved like she owned the ground she stepped on. "Now this," Obinna told his friends, "is a woman who matches my energy." But fire cannot warm a home forever. Sometimes it burns it down. From the first night, Needy made her demands clear. "I want a bigger house, a new car, more money." Her voice filled every corner of the home, pushing out the peace that once lived there. Obinna tried to keep up, but every gift only opened the door to more demands. Their house became a place of noise, not understanding. Laughter existed, but it was the kind used to hide cracks. Before long, the power struggle began. Needy's words grew sharper. Her tone carried heat. Obinna was no longer the king of his home. He was a man chasing approval. When he tried to stand firm, Needy pushed harder. Modern love, driven by ego, drowned the wisdom their elders once offered. The elders watched from afar and sighed. "Pride marries pride," they said, "and trouble becomes the best man." Then the turning began. Needy's anger rose like a fresh storm. She challenged Obinna in the middle of conversations, cut him off, and raised her voice without fear. At first, Obinna laughed it off, but soon, his smile began to fade. Every disagreement became a battlefield. Their arguments spilled into the streets like broken calabash water, messy, loud, impossible to ignore. Needy mocked his choices, sneered at his spending habits, and sometimes, when angry enough, attacked his manhood. "You claim to be a man. Show me the proof," she would say, loud enough for neighbors to hear. The words he once threw at Amara returned, but this time they were aimed at him. Each insult tasted like bitter herbs. The community watched quietly as the balance shifted. People whispered behind their hands, "His pride has turned against him." Men avoided his eyes. Women shook their heads. Respect, once given to Obinna, began to slip through the cracks of his broken home. In a culture where a man's public honor is his shield, Obinna felt the metal bending. He walked the streets with shoulders lower than before. His fall did not begin with a crash. It began with a slow, painful cracking of pride. And the ancestors, who see all things, watched the story unfolding exactly as the proverb had warned. The whispers began softly, like the rustle of dry leaves in the harmattan wind, but they grew quickly, traveling from compound to compound. Villagers leaned over fences, tilting their heads, murmuring, "Have you seen what is happening in Obinna's house?" The chaos inside his home had spilled beyond the walls, and the streets carried every raised voice, every slammed door. Children stopped playing to watch, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Even the market sellers paused mid-call, listening to the echoes of arguments that had once been quiet secrets behind closed doors. City relatives, dressed in their shiny suits and embroidered dresses, shook their heads in disbelief when they visited. "Surely this cannot be the same Obinna we knew," one whispered to another, adjusting her scarf nervously. A man who once held himself as king of his home is now a clown in his own court. Their laughter was nervous, tinged with pity, but it carried far enough that the neighbors heard. Elders sat in the shade of the iroko trees, their hands folded over walking sticks, and spoke in quiet authority. "The man who laughed at his wife now chokes on his own mockery," one said, his voice carrying the weight of memory and the warning of ancestors. They had taught young men respect, and now the lesson played out like a drumbeat across the village, rhythmic and unavoidable. Obinna's pride began to crack, thin lines spreading across his face like dry earth in the noonday sun. Every insult Needy hurled at him, every public disagreement, chipped away the confidence he had always worn as armor. He tried to laugh it off, but the laughter felt hollow, bouncing back at him like the echo from the village canyon. At night, his household became a story told in hushed tones around cooking fires. Mothers warned their daughters, "Remember Amara, and remember the man who thought pride was power." Children repeated phrases like charms, "Even the tallest man can fall when his heart is heavy with arrogance." The tale of Obinna and Needy spread beyond the town, becoming a cautionary story that would travel for seasons, a warning to all who thought disrespect could hide behind wealth. When the grand business event arrived, meant to display Obinna's success to the city and the villagers alike, the air was thick with expectation. Traders and businessmen crowded the hall, their voices mingling with the scent of roasted yams and burning incense. But Needy turned the gathering into a stage of shame, raising her voice above the music and chatter. "Look at the man who boasts," she exclaimed. "Debts lie at his door. Failures gather in his shadow. And where is the strength he claims?" The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat, then laughter burst forth, sharp, knowing, and exactly like the laughter he had once directed at Amara. The symbolic reversal struck him harder than words ever could. "The drum he beat returns to beat him harder," an elder whispered to the side, pointing at Obinna's bowed shoulders and reddened face. His humiliation was complete, mirrored in the faces of traders and friends, echoing like the rhythmic pounding of festival drums he had once enjoyed. Business deals began to crumble as if termite-infested wood had given way underfoot. Partners withdrew, invitations to join ventures vanished, and promises of profit turned to dust. Friends who once smiled at his arrival now avoided his eyes, their loyalty fleeting, dependent only on the shimmer of his wealth. Community respect, once so abundant that his steps seemed to carry the approval of all, slipped slowly through his fingers, leaving only quiet shaking of heads behind his back. Needy's demands grew like wildfire in harmattan wind, consuming whatever remained of his patience. "A bigger house, a faster car, attention every moment," she barked, and the echo of her words followed him through the streets and into the halls of his crumbling home. It was then that Obinna finally understood the truth of what he had lost, the quiet strength, the calm wisdom, the love that Amara had offered without condition. He had abandoned a woman whose spirit could have lifted him higher than any flashy lifestyle or loud companion. Now, he was left only with a bitter taste of pride's failure, and the lesson was as harsh and unforgiving as the dry wind across the village plains. The town square was alive with color and sound, a symphony of drums, laughter, and the chatter of families gathering for the grand celebration. Stalls overflowed with yams, kola nuts, and woven cloths, while children darted between elders, their small feet stirring the red dust of the earth. Obinna arrived, his chest puffed and polished shoes glinting in the midday sun, with Needy at his side. He hoped that stepping into the crowd with this bold, fiery woman would restore the pride he had lost, a mask to hide the cracks in his reputation. Businessmen nodded in polite acknowledgment, elders observed with knowing eyes, and respected families measured him carefully. Every glance felt like a judgment, every whisper a tiny needle. Obinna straightened his back, forcing a smile, but the pressure of all those eyes weighed heavily on him. The dance of social expectation in this town was a game of power, and he had long known how to play it, until now. A rival woman approached, her eyes sharp, lips curling into a smile that promised mischief. "And who is this firebrand with you, Obinna?" she asked, her voice carrying across the square. Needy's eyes flared, matching her intensity. "She thinks she can challenge me?" Needy snapped, stepping forward. The tension between the two women crackled like lightning over the Harmattan plains. Old jealousies stirred, whispers of past slights rising from the crowd. Before Obinna could step in, Needy seized his arm, dragging him into her heated confrontation. "Do not speak to me like that," she barked. He tried to reason, to calm her, but her fire was unstoppable. The crowd held its breath, sensing the storm, as the delicate balance of pride and honor threatened to shatter. Obinna felt the pull of her fury, helplessly entwined with the very humiliation he had once wielded as power. Nidi's voice rose like thunder, carrying across the square. "You think you are clever? You know nothing of my strength, or the lineage you belittle." She gestured toward his family roots, mocking the tales he had once told with pride. "Your ancestors must weep at your weakness." The crowd recoiled, some stepping back, some whispering nervously, all drawn to the spectacle unfolding before them. She laughed harshly at Obinna's first marriage, recalling the quiet strength of Amara, the wife he had shamed in public so many times. "And your first wife, the silent river, you feared her tears, yet they are louder than your voice." She grabbed a platter of food meant for celebration and flung it toward him, sending yam and palm wine splattering across his fine clothes. The aroma of roasted yams mingled with shock and disbelief. Drinks spilled, laughter and gasps mingled, and the elder's eyes narrowed. "A man who dishonors his home invites chaos to sit beside him," murmured one elder, shaking his head slowly. The proverb hung in the air like a cloud of dust, and Obinna felt it settle onto his shoulders. The laughter of the crowd rose, a chorus of mockery that he had once directed at others, now returned in full measure. The weight of shame pressed down on him like heavy harmattan dust, choking his chest. For the first time, Obinna truly felt the sting he had forced Amara to swallow silently, the humiliation he had ignored in others now carved into his own flesh. His ego cracked, bending under the eyes of people who once praised him, and for the first time, he saw his reflection in their judgment, not as a powerful man, but as a broken one. Laughter surrounded him, echoing in every corner of the square, and as it did, his heart began to fracture. Each chuckle, each gasp, each pointed finger was a hammer striking the pride he had once carried so carelessly. And in that moment, beneath the sun and before the eyes of the community, Obinna understood the lesson he had long ignored. No man can mock peace without inviting chaos upon himself. The rain began without warning, a sudden curtain of silver drops that fell from the sky as if the ancestors themselves were washing the land. Each droplet struck the earth with a soft percussion, mingling with the dust of the village paths and the scent of wet clay. Obinna walked alone, his head bowed, shoulders heavy, as the downpour drenched him. Once proud and unyielding, he now moved as a shadow of his former glory, every step echoing the weight of shame he could no longer hide. Water ran down his soaked clothes, clinging to him like the memories he could not escape. His mind replayed the humiliation Nidi had unleashed, the laughter of the crowd, and the quiet dignity of Amara's tears. Those silent tears haunted him now, a gentle echo of the love he had once taken for granted. Each puddle he stepped through reflected a fractured image, a man undone by his own pride, humbled beneath the mercy of sky and spirit alike. The next morning, Obinna walked the long road back to the village shrine, the mud squelching beneath his feet. Elders gathered in a circle, their faces lined with the wisdom of generations, eyes heavy with ancestral knowledge. He knelt in the dust before them, chest heaving, hands trembling, and offered himself fully in shame. "Humility is the path for a wandering heart," one elder intoned, voice deep with the weight of centuries. Another added, "A broken man who kneels may rise again." Obinna bowed, letting the words sink into his very bones, understanding at last that only through submission to truth and respect could he hope to reclaim honor. He traveled across villages, following whispers of a woman of strength, until he found Amara in a peaceful home filled with family love and healing. His voice shook as he spoke. "Amara, I come to ask forgiveness, truly this time." She turned, calm and measured like water after a storm, listening without judgment. Her voice, soft yet firm, acknowledged his words. Forgiveness passed between them, not as a call to reunion, but as freedom for her spirit, releasing the weight of years of quiet suffering. Amara's story spread through the community, becoming a guiding light for women who dared to honor their dignity. Elders spoke of Obinna's fall, teaching young men that pride could break a home, and humility could mend a soul. Mothers told their daughters her story, a shield against silence, a reminder that strength and forgiveness were paths to enduring respect. The village remembered, and the lessons of love, shame, and redemption became woven into its very soil, carried in drumbeats and whispered in the winds across the plains. The village gathered under the shade of the ancient Irako tree, its broad arms reaching across the square like a guardian of memory. Children paused in their play, elders straightened their spines, and the air was thick with the weight of history. A voice rose, steady and clear, echoing the wisdom passed through generations. One who plants shame will surely harvest it. The words sank into every heart, carrying the echoes of Obinna's past arrogance and the silent tears of Amara. The griot, seated near the fire with drum at his side, raised his hand and reminded all, "Respect is the crown of every home." His voice rolled like distant thunder, touching each listener with the certainty that honor and humility were the foundations upon which families and villages must stand. Even the young ones nodded, sensing the power behind each syllable, understanding that actions ripple beyond the individual to the community itself. Obinna labored quietly, the rhythm of his hands shaping more than clay and timber. They shaped his soul. Each stroke of effort was a lesson in humility, each calloused hand a testament to change. Gone was the arrogance that had once shadowed his every step. Now he moved with care, building not just walls and roofs, but trust and dignity. Villagers watched, some whispering, some nodding slowly, recognizing the sincerity that could not be faked. In time, Obinna's transformation became a living lesson. Even those who had once scoffed at him could not deny the evidence. The fallen could rise again through honest effort, guided by reflection and respect. Mothers told their children of his journey, elders used his life to teach, and the village itself learned that shame sown in pride can be replaced with a harvest of humility. And so, the story of Obinna became woven into the rhythm of the village, a tale for every drumbeat and every whispered word carried by the wind.